Socially, marriage has not and is still not seen as an equal relationship between a man and woman. Thus, Dante's motto over Inferno implies with equal force to marriage, "Ye who enter here leave all hope behind." Marriage defines the ultimate role of women in society. It defines a proper lifestyle of proper women. The child is subjected to this kind of judgment as well. The child born from wedlock with the blessing of the institutional church is a child. Without the sanctity of marriage, the child is called a bastard. This particular condemnation of women is religious in origin. The biblical insult that a woman is a mere appendix to man made out of his rib should be seen for what it is, a superstitious, nonsensical, physiological impossibility that should be removed from the Bible. The mythological story of Eve tempted by the snake, with all the sexual Freudian implications that kind of imagery brings to mind, is too ridiculous to be believed in this day and age. Yet this kind of delusional thinking and scapegoating has made the Bible the #1 bestseller of all time. From this archaic religious superstitiousness, the edict of the church defines social acceptance and morality within the restrictions of the sacred union of marriage, since moralists are ever ready to sacrifice one half of the human race for the sake of some miserable institution which they cannot outgrow. Although twice married, Goldman denounced the institution of marriage as destructive to women's identity. Goldman quoted her father's words to her while growing up. "Girls do not have to learn much. All a Jewish girl needs to know is how to prepare gefilte fish, cut noodles fine, and give the man plenty of children." It is no wonder that Goldman saw marriage as primarily an economic arrangement, an insurance pact. The man-made tradition of marriage evolved from ancient societies that needed a secure environment for the perpetuation of the species, a system of rules to handle the granting of property rights, and the protection of bloodlines. The institution of marriage handled these things. This institution has been paradoxically in constant fluctuation. Arranged marriages involving dowries or proxy were commonplace throughout history between total strangers. The church entered the picture when there appeared to be many marriages taking place without witness or ceremony in the 1500s. The Council of Trent was so disturbed by this that they decreed in 1563 that marriages should be celebrated in the presence of a priest and at least 2 witnesses. Marriage took on a new role of saving men and women from being sinful and of procreation. The dictates of the church could not fix the flaws that were inherent in the institution of marriage, and divorce was invented as a solution to the incompatibility of 2 people joined together till death us do part. Divorce courts dissolved the sacred union, economically keeping the ex-wife and children from starving to death. The paperwork was transferred from the church to the state. Emancipation from the institution of marriage has taken the 20th century woman economically from one institution of servitude to another institution of servitude, the workplace. Goldman witnessed this transition along with 6 million women who had the equal right with men to be exploited, to be robbed, to go on strike, to starve even, defining once again the inequality of man-made institutions. Emma Goldman was arrested innumerable times and served 3 terms of imprisonment. She was jailed in 1893, 1901, 1916, 1919, and 1921 from charges ranging from inciting to riot to advocating the use of birth control to opposition to World War I. Since the founding of this country, Goldman was only the 2nd woman to be imprisoned for a political offense, violating the Espionage Act and sedition law. During her conflict with the powers that be, the intrusive persecution of those powers forced her to change her name just to find a place to live. Vilified by President Roosevelt and constantly hounded by law enforcement, Goldman was reduced to renting a room in a house of prostitution, where she saw once again a social injustice towards women, and asked what is really the cause of the trade in women. Exploitation, of course. The system is to blame, the system which forces women to sell their womanhood and independence to the highest bidder is a branch of the same evil system which gives to a few the right to live on the wealth produced by their fellow men, 99% of whom must toil and slave early and late for barely enough to keep soul and body together, while the fruits of their labor are absorbed by a few idle vampires who are surrounded by every luxury wealth can purchase. The social and economic causes of prostitution are obvious. Yet Goldman looked back in time and found that prostitution is of religious origin, maintained and fostered for many centuries not as a shame but as a virtue, hailed as such by the gods themselves. Herodotus recorded in his history chronicles that every woman came to a temple of one of the many gods and sat waiting for a perfect stranger to drop a coin where she sat. The custom mixed worship and sex. Much later, as Christianity evolved, the Church not only condoned prostitution, but in the case of Pope Sixtus IV, from one single brothel which he himself had built, he received an income of 20,000 ducats. The policy of the Church changed over the years from profitability to condemnation, yet the double standard of morality from the Church and society has never had an unkind word for the men who economically support prostitution. The fact that prostitution is said to be the oldest business in the world certainly doesn't say much for the world of business, does it? Except that the origins of prostitution in the Church make the Church a part of the business world. This age-old institution deplorably defines the lack of progress people have made toward eliminating the inhumanity to women over the thousands of years as civilization has developed. The look of society is cosmetic. Society has merely lifted itself from the gutter by paving the street. The hierarchy of societal institutions is an injustice to every man, woman, and child born to live under the yoke of oppression. Goldman's radical perspective saw equality as a right. The equality she dreamed of challenged the authority of institutional inequality, whether it was in the schools, the churches, or the government. Goldman lived her life fighting against the injustices she saw. Her beliefs echo from the grave. Even in death, Goldman speaks to people oppressed. The words written on Emma Goldman's gravestone read, "Liberty will not descend to the people. People must raise themselves to it." If actions speak louder than words, Emma Goldman was a woman of both. And that is what we must do, from the radical belief that equality is a right to be demanded, not asked for, from a subservient attitude. We must have the courage of our convictions and diminish Reedy's timeline of 8,000 years to now.
Thank you.
And I'm not, that's terrible.